you for joining us. Thank you for joining us this morning. As Pip said, I've been doing some writing under Pip's guidance, and most of it in partnership with the wonderful Jules Coop, who is both Pip and Jules extremely knowledgeable about mathematics. And one of the ongoing conversations we've been having are those ways of getting maths into not just your maths session for the day, but across your whole day, and those opportunities that build some knowledge. And so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. My name is Jody. I grew up in Southland, right out on the 50 Strait, and I have done all of my teaching in the North Island, so in the Manawatu, and then here in Auckland. This is my second career, so I was actually a chef before I was a teacher, and so you kind of bring that knowledge with you to what you're doing. What I wanted to talk to you about first is a really common idea that starts on day one across many schools across the globe, and is very well used here in New Zealand. Some people call it 100 days maths. Some people call it 100 days wiser or cleverer. Some people call it number of the day. And so no matter what you call it at your place, I would advocate for right across our primary schools, right up to year 6. I think number of the day or 100 days maths is a really important routine to have in your class. Some of the things that I think make it really next level beyond just talking about the basics of that number are the little things that you have in place. So in my classroom, we have a shared scrapbook where the kayako and the learners record their ideas. So if we started, for example, as everybody does, with the first day, the number one on the very first day, we would, for new entrants, we would write the number one together and we'd practice that. We would write the word one together. We would do the word tahi. We would then draw some of the things that we know are important about one. So that it's the idea of first, as well as the number one. And as your numbers become more complex, we use some of the things that we're going to use in our classroom, like tens frames, to start recording the numbers as they grow bigger. The reason I think that 100 Days of Maths is so amazing for a classroom of junior school children is because it very naturally builds our place value knowledge. So you start in the known. Most children know their numbers 1 to 5 when they come to school. Even if they don't know the way to make up those numbers, they certainly are familiar with them. They know they're 5 years old or 6 years old, depending on their age at starting school. And then if you're starting to build the idea of tens frames, so each day you're adding to your wall display. So I have 10 blank tens frames up there, and as you fill one and you get to 10, you write the number 10 beside it. So none of that is pre-filled. We also have, as part of our display, the numerals. We have te reo and English number words. We have a hundreds board so that you can talk about collections of 10 as it builds in each line of your hundreds board. We have 10 empty tens frames, and I blue tack, or I don't, the children blue tack a counter on to that, because you already probably have counters in your room. You can do that in any fancy pants way you like, or you can do that virtually, but we literally do a counter and a piece of blue tack. We have number fans so that we can make the number as we're talking about that day's number. We have a container, as is a big glass cookie jar, because I like the children to be able to see in it. And we have rubber bands and popsicle sticks. So each day that you do the next day's number, so say you're on day number 13, in your container you would already have 13 popsicle sticks. And so when you get to that exciting day when it's day 10, instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which we do, we then talk about the idea of place value, and then you can bundle that as one bundle of 10. And so on day 11, you count that as you drop it in. So you drop the bundle of 10 in and count 10, 11, and then the next day 10, 11, 12, and the next day 10, 11, 12, 13 until you get to 20. So then you're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and magically you've got 10 more, so you bundle that for a second bundle. So you can see for younger children how that idea of place value becomes very real and very visual for them. We have number lines or number strips. We have some prompts so that if I'm not there and I've got a reliever or somebody else, my deputy principal popping in to do that part of the day for me because I'm needed somewhere else, I've got some prompts to help them to know what we talk about. And the prompts are things that are about the number pattern talk or the place value talk that we're currently focused on. So I don't do that in any super fancy way. That's usually just a little sticky note on the next page of my scrapbook so that current focus is there and available. There are some really amazing number of the day resources available through Tahi Maths. So they do number of the day, and on Tahi Maths there's a beautiful little the Count from Sesame Street does a little song about the number of the day, and then there's some talk about number of the day. There's lots of other slides and videos that people have available because, like I said, 100 Days Maths is done around the globe. We use loose parts materials like stones and sticks. We use some of our maths equipment, but I want the children to get an idea that that maths talk that we're doing isn't just in maths time, and it's just not with our special maths equipment, that actually maths is happening around us all of the time and that we can use that maths knowledge everywhere that we go. So I intentionally look for the things that my children are interested in or their passion that they're bringing into the classroom. And there were certain times of year for little people that there's little pieces falling off the trees, and on the way to school they've found some seed pods, and so we might then do our number of the day using those seed pods or those leaves or those feathers or those shells or whatever they've found. And so I encourage you to find a way to fit that into your day, and no matter what you call it. When we get to the celebration of 100 days, so if you've done it with, say, year sixes, and you've done for your number of the day, you've done all the different ways that you can make one. Remember, you don't have to just do it counting as one and saying as one. You might be like, how can I use decimal place value, addition or subtraction to make one? Or how can I use my fractional knowledge and do these fractional numbers together to make one? So some of our further up the school, primary school teachers think that the idea of the number one is too simple. But as you know, as mathematicians yourself, the idea of one can be as complex as you make it to be, and the children can get as creative and help extend those ideas for each other. So when you get to that celebration, I would strongly encourage you to not go with the common ideas of the celebration for 100 days. So in other countries, and creeping into New Zealand as I've come dressed as 100 days old, I try and veer away from that for my school. So I'll put out an idea of suggestions. And so we talk about, because it's place value and number knowledge we've been trying to build, I put out some suggestions. So I talk about collections of 10. So you might do your costume or your idea that you're going to share. It doesn't have to be a costume, but you're going to do some talking about all of our learning until we got to 100 days of maths, and we're going to talk about collections, particularly and collections of tens and ones for junior children, or if it's been decimals or fractional knowledge that you've done for older children, you'd encourage your children to celebrate in that way. We have a time for my school where we come together and we have a bit of a parade, and we do some 10 different exercises to do 100 really quick exercises together. Some of our parents go next level and send some baking in with all sorts of themes. You can go as big or as small as you like with your celebration, but it's important to celebrate there. And then you get the really awesome pressure from the children that actually, well, what happens on day 101? Because you can't get to 200. So that's for you as a teacher. Do you pause there, or do you keep it going in some other way? Or do you just go to whatever day you get to, and then they finish, and then they have a celebration at home when they get to the 200? So that's one of the routines we use. The other routine that I think you should use, and there's actually some really amazing lessons, surprise, surprise, on census at schools for this, for ideas for how to use calendar maths in your classroom. I say that tongue in cheek, and Pip and I are having a little laugh about that because Pip, Jules, and I have been working on ideas that you can use mathematics in ways throughout your classroom year that to have statistics and probability embedded into your day. So, calendar maths is a really awesome way to do that. You, of course, are collecting data all the way along. You start with a blank calendar that can be digital or physical. I'm pretty keep it simple in my class. So that's a piece of paper that I've ruled up some squares and written some numbers on so that my children can be the people who add the bits to the calendar. So we add what the season is. We add by colouring in which the weekend days are. We talk about where we're up to now. And I've got a little um, homemade laminated arrow that we move along to where we're up to for my very new to school children. So it's very clear to see on all that busyness. Today is the day we're talking about on our calendar. We, of course, are talking about days of the week. We're talking about them in Te Reo Māori and in English, and sometimes in other languages too, depending on who's in your class and what knowledge you have and what you can incorporate in. But we definitely always do it every day in Te Reo Māori and English. The movable arrow helps us keep that idea of what is today. We then do some drawing and colouring in as we go along to fill our data in. So before you start your data collection, you need to have some agreed weather symbols, and we make them ourselves. And so we talk about some of the days, if you looked at the weather for the whole day long, particularly in a skinny little piece of land like Auckland, you might have had some foggy weather, and then you might have had some windy weather, and then you might have had some sunny weather, and you might have even had a bit of a sprinkle of rain. And are we going to record all of that weather? We don't in my class. We record it at a set time of the day every day, so that we have got some comparison that makes sense to us. You can make it as complex as you like. You could collect the weather at 3 different points of your day. You could collect the weather with different groups of people at different times of the day. We keep it simple so that even on the busiest of busy days, 100 days maths and calendar maths happens for my class every day. Our weather symbols usually takes quite a bit of maybe a whole 40 minutes or so for little people to come up with their ideas, draw their ideas, something that everybody can draw, and then to come to class agreement. Class agreement of your symbols is really important because those are the children that are keeping the fidelity. They're keeping those symbols true when you're not in the room. And so they will be bossy and tell the person who's doing that when you're not there what the symbols are. And sometimes the adult who's there when you're not might talk about, oh, we're going to draw these 3 different things. But in my class, we talk about what is the weather mostly right now. And so that idea of it's mostly sunny or it's mostly windy or it's still really foggy. That's what we draw. So we record one thing. We have got some amazing resources that have been made and gifted to us as Kayako in New Zealand. And because you'll get a copy of the slideshow, I've put that as a clickable link there for you. The Niwa Korero about the weather. When you go to their site, it looks a bit dry, and you think, oh dear, maybe I won't click that link. Please do, because when you click the link, and you have to download them one by one for all the different weather, but they are a beautiful picture that is of New Zealand, and then it has got the prompt for what to say about the weather and the response. So they're so amazing. They're beautiful. And we use them every day in my class. I've got them on a little ring and laminated, and we flick through them and we go, is it blah, blah, blah today? No, turn it. Is it blah, blah, blah today? So, and you can have some partner talk discussion about that. There's a wonderful lady who does her company is called Green Grubs. She's a New Zealand teacher, and her weather posters are also really high quality. I have some speech bubbles or cards to record the question or prompt, and we change that regularly. So mine's a vivid and a piece of paper of a speech bubble I've drawn myself, and it might say how many school days in May were rainy. So we start putting those prompts on once we've collected some data. And sometimes, depending on where we get up to later in the year, if I've kept the children for a bit longer, we then do some simple weather measuring ourselves, and that's some great application of figuring out actually how fast, how many times it's spun when you're doing wind speed, or how many lines you got for filling up for your water. The census at school lesson, like I said, what's the weather, we think is really useful for all of the junior school years 1 to 3. And then we take that, in my class, we take that data that we've built up over time, whether it's been strongly teacher-led at the start and then becomes very much student-led, and we use a beautiful tool, Gracie and Friends, which you can find online, and that's a statistical little app that you can use on your iPads. It's very easy to teach the children how to use that to graph their own data, and you can put it has the opportunity for you to upload as a photograph your actual visuals that you've used for your weather data. So you can take what you've done in class and you can very easily translate that onto the app, and that can be shared on your big screen, so you can do that together, or you can do that as little groups of children or pairs of children on your iPad, so they can work with the data that you've collected in a way that's appropriate for their age. So my big driver, really, most of all, is looking for opportunities for mathematics across the curriculum. So I'm always looking for in our inquiry learning or in our picture books or in our everything that's not considered maths already, how can I squish some maths in, and not just maths that is counting or maths that is numeral identification, but actually some of those bigger concepts. So you'll see a photograph on the slide on the left of some children gathered around with some clipboards and some adults. That's a piece of our inquiry learning that we did that was inspired from a picture book called Mangrove. Glenda Kane is the New Zealand author and Lisa Allen is the illustrator of that beautiful book. And it's a book about book about conservation, really, and about how ideas about mangroves change over time. And so we used that book as our inquiry inspiration. I then borrowed the idea from the Otago Museum, Otago University 1 metre square citizen science project. And although we didn't have a rocky shore to apply that to, I had a mangrove intertidal zone to apply that to. So the piece of learning that we were doing that was mathematical was about using a quadrant and collecting data from that. So before we went and did that in the mangrove setting, we actually used the idea of a metre square, which I just did with some pieces of bamboo sticks to make a metre square on the grass at school. And we did that in small groups, looking at how many flowers we could see in that metre square, or how many little insects we could see in that metre square, collecting that data and then graphing that data. So even though our inquiry was about mangroves, we could do some mathematics that directly linked to that and practice the skill that we were going to do when we went to the mangroves. We look for opportunities in traditional tales, and most junior classrooms do some traditional tales or looking at Māori pūrākau. And so, for example, if we were doing the story of Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears, we might take that idea of something that is small size, medium size, or larger size. And then with our compare bears, we might create a bed or a chair or something that fits the tiny little bear, the medium sized bear, and the bigger bear. And all of our conversation is around those size words that you use to describe the different things that you're making. If you were doing the Three Little Pigs, you could use your loose parts materials or some other materials that you have and build 3 different houses for 3 different pigs out of 3 different sorts of materials. And you could actually use something, whether it's something that forces some air out the end, or whether you use your own breath to see how far you could move each of those houses when you were pretending to be the big bad wolf. And so then you could do the measuring, which you might use with blocks, or you might measure with strips of paper to see how far you're able to move that house. Or if you were doing a story like Battle of the Mountains, you might look at mapping and grids and how you could, with your materials, your loose parts, how you could recreate that as something in your classroom about the location of the mountains after the end of the Battle of the Mountain, and then the mathematical language for how you would describe where those mountains had moved to. So all the way along, you're using whatever else is happening in your school, particularly the natural world or particularly story, as your inspiration. You're looking for opportunities to count, sort, order, compare. You're going to ask, what if, I wonder why, I noticed this, I was then thinking, all those little prompts along the way. And then you as the teacher are gifting that mathematical language, so it goes from unknown to known, to being able to, the children being able to use that language themselves in appropriate ways. So the other idea that I think is really important is building routines and having lots of opportunities for children to take that learning that they've done in their 100 days of maths, or in their calendar maths, or in their other mathematics lessons, and the materials that they're using, the mathematics materials that they're using, and being able to apply them. So the idea of having number sense, being able to make connections with what they're learning and have opportunities to understand the relationships between those ideas. And that takes time and effort to create, particularly for children who haven't had some preschool experiences, or children who the technical and specific mathematics language we're using isn't familiar to them, or indeed many of the children in my class who English as a second language, they've got really good mathematics thinking, but they're struggling with the language side of things. And so the idea of number sense routines is really useful for that. I personally love this book, Number Sense Routines. It it is not a New Zealand book, and it is published in 2011, but it's still the most wonderful collection of ideas for me. So good that when I'm mentoring people, I always make sure they have got a copy of that. It covers all sorts of wonderful routines like dot cards and tens frames, abacus ideas, choral counting, counting around the circle, stopping, starting counting, organic number lines, using your tens wands, and different ways to make the number. It has got lots and lots of ideas and talks about how you build on, if your child understands this, where the part to go to next is, so that you're developing their ideas. Other super wonderful books that inspire us, and I'll just hold it up to the screen. This one, That's a Possibility, by Bruce Goldstone. He has got all sorts of wonderful mathematics books, and his books are so fantastic for all sorts of discussions, and on a huge range of topics. And so if you have got them in your school, some of them are available from National Library. They're really amazing mathematics books for that discussion and getting children to talk about their maths thinking. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was some of the other things that people wouldn't think is necessarily mathematics, but actually are very much the vital part of mathematics in your classroom. So it's about the routines or the ways of doing mathematics that take it beyond the individual child to the child having lots and lots of opportunities to talk and hear the ideas of other people. So in our class all day long, we use Shirley Clark's Talk Partners, and Shirley Clark's Talk Partners in a nutshell is more than a turn and talk, think, peer, share relationship. It's actually a set person that you have for the 3 weeks, and they are your person to talk to all of the time about everything throughout the school day. And it builds a culture of everybody being each other's support person and everybody being valuable in your classroom. And so it's not about letting children just work with the people that they're familiar with or most comfortable with, but throughout the year, building that collective classroom climate of we're a community of learners together. So Shirley Clark, amazing for building that. I won't try and summarise anymore. That's a clickable link to take you to her work. Kagan Cooperative Structures, so inside, outside circle, rally robin, those sorts of kind of ways of talk and structures for talking that allow for every child to have a chance to talk and hear somebody, and then a second chance to talk, and then hear again, and then a third chance to talk and hear again, so that they actually can build understanding very quickly. And then, of course, the most amazing talk moves, which I'm sure all of you use in your classrooms, and that is very specific, productive talk. And so when I get new to school children and setting up my classroom, we will start with one talk move. We'll practice that until we know it well. Then we move on until we know all of them. And then you can say, okay, now we're going to add on, etc. And the children then know exactly what's expected of them. If you're further up the school, hopefully that's established by the time the children get to you. But of course, you can assume nothing, and maybe it's not. And so they're the things that I would start with if I was thinking about using every opportunity for mathematics in my classroom. We're super lucky in New Zealand. We've got lots of really amazing resources to draw upon. And again, I'll push you back to census at schools, really amazing specific year level opportunities, and although they're statistics and probability lessons, they are quality maths all the way through. And so take those lessons, innovate off them, use them, take some of the talk, or take some of the resources and the tools suggested at the end, and they are, we think, valuable because they're contextualised for New Zealand. And so just at the end, it's just my email for if there's anything I can help with or suggest, or anything I haven't been clear and you think, oh, I'd love to know a little bit more about that, or Jody, could you send me whatever? That's the email to get hold of me on. So, Pip, do we have any questions or anything before we wrap up?
Absolutely. People have got questions. They can, let me just see, something's just popped in here. I can't make it full screen. Here we go.
Shall I unshare now? Do you want me to stop?
Sure, you can stop sharing, and I'm going to just stop the recording.